Ancient Scripture, Books of the Bible series. This week, an in-depth look at the second book of Moses, the book of Exodus.
Imagine a world superpower.
Right.
Right. Armed with the ancient equivalent of nuclear weapons.
Oh, absolutely, the dominant force on Earth.
Right. And then imagine that entire global empire being completely dismantled, brought to its knees by an invisible force, without a single sword ever being drawn.
It sounds like fiction, honestly.
It really does.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is the true story of the Exodus. And if you're joining us for this deep dive today, we are taking you on a massive journey.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of theological notes and historical commentaries to get through.
Exactly, because this isn't just, a dusty myth about parting water or some archaic Sunday school lesson.
No, not at all.
When you actually step into the historical and theological reality of this text, it is a masterclass in psychological warfare.
It really is the systematic dismantling of an entire civilization's worldview.
Yeah, and it serves as the literal blueprint for basically every human concept of freedom that followed.
Which is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You go from a world where human empires dictate reality to a world where those same empires are revealed to be incredibly fragile.
So fragile. And to understand the book of Exodus, we have to look at where it sits historically, right?
Yeah, structurally speaking, if you read the book right before it, Genesis, you're reading a book of beginnings.
It's all about one family, right?
Exactly. It's a book of election. God picking one specific family line, starting with Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob.
But Exodus is entirely different.
Completely different. Exodus is fundamentally the book of redemption.
Yeah, it's the story of how that single family mutated into a massive nation.
A nation that was just crushed under the machinery of an empire.
And how they had to be violently, miraculously extracted. And what makes this deep dive so fascinating today is, well, the perspective it was written from.
Right. The authorship is key here.
Yeah, this isn't just a historical logbook compiled centuries later by some detached scribe in a library.
No, we are looking at a text written by its own main character.
Which is wild. Moses is compiling this. It's a first-hand memoir written by the covenant mediator himself.
A man who literally stood on top of a burning mountain for 40 days.
Yeah, speaking to the creator of the universe.
So you get this incredible blend of gritty, boots-on-the-ground historical reality, woven together with this sweeping, almost overwhelming prophetic vision.
Moses isn't just writing down what happened, right? He is constantly embedding these profound symbols and typologies.
He's writing a physical history that maps out a spiritual reality.
But to grasp the magnitude of the rescue, we really need to set the stage.
We need to understand the absolute despair of the captivity.
Right, because this wasn't just a vague, long time ago in a desert far away kind of thing. We have incredibly specific historical anchors for this.
We do. And placing this on the timeline of human history completely changes how we view the political stakes.
So what are we talking about specifically?
Well, based on conservative historical scholarship from our sources, we can date the actual Exodus to exactly 1446 BC.
Wow, that's specific. How did they arrive at that date?
We get that by tracking backward from the book of 1 Kings. Chapter 6, verse 1 states that King Solomon began building the temple in his 4th year.
Okay, and we know when that was historically.
Yes, historically that was 966 BC. And that same verse explicitly notes that construction began exactly 480 years after Israel came out of Egypt.
Oh, so you just do the math.
Exactly. Do the math. And you land firmly at 1446 BC.
Which gives us the identities of the pharaohs.
Precisely. If the Exodus happens in 1446 BC, that means the pharaoh of the intense oppression, the one who ordered the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, is likely Thutmose III.
And he was basically a massive warlord, right?
One of the most powerful militaristic rulers in Egyptian history, yeah.
And the pharaoh of the Exodus itself. The one who absorbs the plagues.
That would be Amenhotep II.
Now here is a historical wrinkle from the notes that I find absolutely fascinating.
The new king.
Yes. The book of Exodus opens with this ominous line. There arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph.
Which is strange when you think about it.
Right. I mean, Joseph was the Hebrew who deciphered Pharaoh's dreams centuries earlier. He saved the entire Egyptian empire from starving during a famine.
He was the second most powerful man in the known world.
Exactly. How does a new pharaoh just forget a national hero of that magnitude? It feels like an American president just forgetting who George Washington was.
It makes no sense at all. Well, not if you assume a continuous peaceful Egyptian dynasty.
So what happened?
When you look closely at the broader biblical text, there's a massive clue. In the book of Isaiah, specifically chapter 52, the prophet refers to an Assyrian oppressing Israel in Egypt.
An Assyrian in Egypt?
Yeah. This aligns with a major historical disruption known as the Hyksos period. The Hyksos were foreign invaders who conquered Lower Egypt and took the throne.
Oh, wow. So this new king isn't a native Egyptian who just forgot his own history.
No, he's a foreign conqueror.
That geopolitical reality perfectly explains his extreme paranoia then.
Think about it from his perspective. You are a foreign warlord occupying the throne. You look over at Goshen.
Which is the best land.
Right, the most fertile region of the Delta. And you see a localized, rapidly multiplying ethnic group that is not loyal to you.
So the text says Pharaoh was terrified they would join Egypt's enemies in a war.
He wasn't enslaving them just for the sake of arbitrary cruelty. This was calculated political subjugation.
Driven by the absolute terror of losing a recently conquered throne, that completely reframes the conflict. It's a police state.
A total police state.
But beyond the politics, it's a massive cultural collision, too. When you look at Egypt during this era, it is a culture utterly obsessed with death.
Oh, deeply obsessed.
I mean, their greatest piece of literature is literally called the Book of the Dead. The pyramids are just glorified tombstones.
Oh, they poured their vast wealth and science into embalming.
Living in the past tense. It's the ultimate monument to human self-reliance.
Egypt deified its own power. The pharaoh was viewed as a literal god on earth.
The son of the sun god, Re.
Exactly. The societal structure was a pyramid scheme of worship directed at human lusts. Egypt represents the absolute pinnacle of what the Bible calls the world system.
You know, it makes me think of an ancient version of the Matrix.
That's a great way to put it.
Egypt is this giant, all-encompassing system of psychological and physical control. It demands your labor, your worship, your life to sustain its own illusion.
And the Israelites are plugged right into it.
Mentally and physically. Trapped making bricks in the mud to build monuments to dead men.
But their actual destiny is completely opposed to that. Their calling is to be a kingdom of priests serving the living God, the I Am.
So they are meant for life, but they are drowning in a culture of death.
Which brings us to the physical location of Goshen.
Right, the incubator.
Exactly. It's the best land, but it serves a specific purpose. They arrived as a family of 70 people, but in Goshen, physically separated from the cultural heart of Egypt.
They multiply into a nation of millions.
They are being incubated, prepared to be unplugged from that matrix.
But to break them out, God needs a deliverer. And the sheer hilarious irony of how God prepares this deliverer is honestly one of my favorite things in all of recorded history.
It is brilliant.
So Pharaoh is paranoid. He issues this horrific decree. Every newborn male Hebrew baby must be thrown into the Nile River to drown.
He's trying to exterminate their future.
And then we meet Moses' mother, Jochebed. She essentially obeys the letter of the law, right?
Technically, yes. The law said put him in the river, so she puts him in the river.
But in a basket.
And not just any basket. The specific Hebrew word used for that little papyrus basket coated in pitch is tebah.
And that word is incredibly rare.
It is only used one other time in the entire Old Testament. It's the exact same word used for Noah's Ark.
Wow.
It is a vessel of salvation designed to float above the waters of death and judgment.
So this tiny ark floats down the river, and by sheer divine providence, it lands in the private bathing area of Pharaoh's own daughter.
The irony is just staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
Pharaoh is bankrupting his state resources, trying to exterminate the Hebrew population. He is obsessed with control.
And his own daughter adopts the very Hebrew child destined to destroy his empire.
So Pharaoh ends up providing Moses with free room and board, royal protection, and an unparalleled education.
Moses learns their military strategy, their politics, their psychology.
The devil is literally footing the bill to train his own destroyer right under his own roof.
You couldn't invent a more subversive plot, but the making of a deliverer is not a fast process.
No, it takes a lifetime.
It takes a lifetime of breaking down the ego. When you track Moses' life, it divides perfectly into this fascinating timeline. 3 acts, each exactly 40 years long, the 40-40-40 timeline.
Break that down for us because the psychological shifts in Moses are just staggering.
So Act 1 is his 40 years in the royal palace. He grows up with absolute power and prestige.
But he knows he's a Hebrew.
Right. He sees his people suffering. And at age 40, he decides he is going to be the deliverer.
But he tries to do it his own way.
He uses Egyptian methods. He acts in the flesh. He sees a taskmaster beating a Hebrew, so Moses murders the Egyptian and hides the body in the sand.
He probably thinks his brethren will recognize him as a hero.
But they don't. They immediately turn on him. They say, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?"
It's a total rejection.
Because flesh cannot deliver flesh. Moses has all the right intentions, but entirely the wrong methodology.
And when Pharaoh finds out, Moses has to run.
Which ushers in Act 2. He flees to the wilderness of Midian, and he sits there for 40 years.
Talk about a psychological crash.
It must have been brutal.
You go from being the prince of the most advanced civilization on Earth to being a forgotten fugitive, staring at the back end of a flock of sheep in a barren desert.
For 4 decades, the silence must have been deafening.
It was an absolute breaking of his ego.
Completely. He had to unlearn his Egyptian self-reliance. In Egypt, he thought he was somebody. In Midian, he learned he was a nobody.
God had to completely empty him of his own strength.
Before he could fill him with divine purpose. And that humbling prepares him for Act 3, the 40 years of actual ministry.
Now, as we look at the sweep of Moses' life from our source notes, it's impossible to ignore how he functions as this massive prophetic shadow.
He is the ultimate biblical type or foreshadowing of Jesus Christ.
If you lay their lives side by side, the parallels are almost unbelievable.
Structurally, they are identical in their redemptive roles. Both had their infancy endangered by a paranoid king.
Pharaoh drowning the boys, and Herod slaughtering the innocents in Bethlehem.
Exactly. And both explicitly rejected the political kingdoms of this world.
Moses walked away from the throne of Egypt, and Jesus rejected Satan's offer of the kingdoms of the world in the wilderness.
Both were sent to deliver their people from bondage. Moses from physical slavery, Christ from the spiritual slavery of sin and death.
Both served as the sole mediators of a new covenant. Moses on Mount Sinai, Christ on Mount Calvary.
And perhaps the most poignant parallel, they were both initially rejected by their own brethren.
Right. Moses tried to help and was pushed away. Jesus came to his own, and his own received him not.
The rejection was a necessary step to pave the way for the ultimate deliverance.
So we find Moses at the end of Act 2. He is 80 years old, an obscure shepherd.
And one day, near Mount Horeb, which is Sinai, he sees something impossible. A bush on fire that isn't turning to ash.
The burning bush, one of the most famous scenes in human history.
But this isn't just a neat magic trick. The imagery woven into this moment is incredibly dense.
Right, why a bush? Why not a majestic cedar tree? Or just speaking out of the sky?
The specific type of bush is the key. It's a desert acacia bush, which is essentially a tangle of thorns.
And thorns have a specific meaning.
You have to trace the imagery back to Genesis. In Eden, after the rebellion, God curses the ground. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth.
So thorns are the physical manifestation of the curse of sin.
Exactly, which echoes perfectly with the crown of thorns violently pressed into Christ's head later on. So this lowly desert bush represents fallen, sin-cursed humanity.
And the fire.
Fire consistently symbolizes God's consuming, absolute, holy judgment.
So think about the physics here. A dry thorn bush in a desert is highly combustible. When the fire of God's holy judgment touches the curse of human sin.
The natural result should be instant incineration. The bush should be gone in seconds.
But the miracle is that the sin-cursed bush is not consumed by the fire of judgment.
Yes, it is the perfect visual model of God's grace. The fire is raging, but it does not destroy the cursed bush.
It's a picture of how God intends to dwell among a sinful people without wiping them out.
It's beautiful. And out of that fire, God speaks. He calls Moses, gives him the mission, and Moses asks the obvious question.
Who I say sent me?
And God replies, I am, W-H-U, I am, Y-H-W-H.
I want to pause here because that is such a staggering statement of identity.
It is the ultimate claim of self-existence. I am.
He doesn't define himself by relation to anything else.
Exactly. I am not the God of the river or the sun. I simply am. He relies on absolutely nothing else for his existence.
The uncaused cause.
No beginning, no end, no equal.
And we cannot gloss over how this connects to the New Testament. Fast forward centuries later, Jesus is debating the religious scholars in Jerusalem.
In John chapter 8.
Right. They are arguing about Abraham. And Jesus drops this absolute theological bomb on them. He doesn't say, before Abraham was, I was.
No, he says, before Abraham was, I am.
He is explicitly claiming the divine identity that spoke out of the burning bush.
which is why the religious leaders instantly picked up stones to execute him for blasphemy. They knew exactly what he was claiming. He was claiming to be the voice in the fire.
Man, that is powerful. So Moses is standing there absorbing this, and God tells him, "Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground."
The shoes are significant here.
Right. Beyond just basic Middle Eastern respect, there is a deep typology regarding shoes.
In biblical typology, shoes constantly represent a person's walk, their daily life, or their human service.
Like the prodigal son getting shoes put back on his feet to restore his standing.
Or Paul talking about having your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel.
Huh.
Shoes are about your earthly works.
So taking them off.
Means that when you step into the absolute presence of God's holiness, all of your human works, your own walk, has to be completely stripped away.
You can't bring dirt from your own path into that space.
You come entirely reliant on him.
So God gives Moses his mission. And he asks him, "What is in your hand?" And Moses has his shepherd's staff.
This piece of dead desert wood.
God tells him to throw it on the ground. It turns into a serpent. Moses grabs it. It turns back into a rod. It becomes the rod of God.
A powerful tool.
But here's where I have to push back a little on the story, or at least voice a struggle I've had.
Go for it.
Moses takes this to Pharaoh's court. He throws the rod down. It becomes a serpent. But then Pharaoh calls in his magicians, and they do the exact same thing.
Yeah, they do.
If the demonic forces of Egypt have the same magic, how is God's power actually unique? Doesn't this just look like a parlor trick? If I were Pharaoh, I'd say, cool, my guys can do that too.
It's a common pushback. The text doesn't shy away from it. These magicians, who Paul later identifies as Jannes and Jambres, are heavily involved in the dark arts.
And they replicate the first three signs, right?
Yes, they turn rods to serpents, water to blood, and summon frogs. But there is a massive distinction you have to recognize about the nature of evil.
Which is?
Satan is fundamentally a counterfeiter.
Ah.
He has no original material. He cannot create life out of nothing. He can only imitate or pervert what God has already done.
So his goal isn't to overpower God, it's just to cause confusion.
Exactly. He wants to harden Pharaoh's heart by making God's power seem ordinary.
We can do that too, so your God isn't special.
Right. But look at what happens in that first encounter. Yes, the magicians produce serpents, but Aaron's serpent turns and violently swallows up all of their serpents.
Oh, man.
It is a definitive demonstration of ultimate supremacy. The counterfeit is completely consumed by the genuine power of heaven. The magicians are left standing there without their staffs.
That sets the stage perfectly for the absolute devastation that follows. Because God doesn't just ask nicely anymore. When Pharaoh refuses, God declares absolute war.
And this brings us to the plagues.
Now, growing up, I always thought of the 10 plagues as just random ecological disasters, like God throwing weather phenomena at Egypt to annoy them into submission.
A lot of people think that, but when you study the historical context, these are precision tactical strikes.
It is not an ecological war. It is a theological war.
Egypt worshipped a vast pantheon of nature deities, hundreds of gods. And with these 10 plagues, God systematically humiliates every single major deity.
Let's walk through some of them. The first plague, turning the Nile River to blood. To us, that's just gross.
But to an Egyptian, the Nile was the lifeblood of their civilization. They literally worshipped the river as the god Hapi.
So by turning it to blood where the fish die.
God is demonstrating he holds the power of life and death over their greatest source of life. He killed their god.
And the frogs. I used to think the plague of frogs was almost comical. But the Egyptians worshipped Hecate,
The goddess of fertility and resurrection, depicted with the head of a frog.
You couldn't even kill them, right?
No, they were sacred. So God says, you want frogs? I will give you frogs. They swarm everywhere. And then God lets them all die.
The land literally stank with the rotting corpses of their fertility goddess.
He turned their object of worship into an absolute curse.
It just escalates from there. The plague of darkness. Not just an eclipse, but a darkness that could be felt.
The supernatural terror paralyzing the nation for 3 days. And that targets Re, the supreme sun god.
By plunging the empire into total darkness while Israel had light, God is asserting dominance over the sun itself.
And finally, the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. This targets Pharaoh himself.
Because he was considered the divine incarnate son of Re, right?
Exactly. His firstborn was the heir to that divine lineage. By striking down the firstborn, God proves Pharaoh has absolutely no power over life or death. The entire religious structure is leveled.
I want to pause and think about the psychological impact on the Israelites. You're a Hebrew slave. You've spent your life terrified of these gods.
And suddenly you get a front row seat to watch your invisible God crush the gods of your oppressors.
It would completely shatter the mental chains Egypt had wrapped around them. It proves the Matrix was entirely impotent.
Absolutely.
But as we watch this play out, we have to confront a major philosophical tension: the hardening of Pharaoh's heart.
It's a tough one.
I know listeners struggle with it. The text says Pharaoh hardened his own heart, but it also explicitly says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
It does.
If God forces a man to be stubborn and then punishes him for it, isn't that divine entrapment? Does Pharaoh have free will?
It is the ultimate paradox of divine sovereignty and human responsibility. But look at the sequence. God does not take a pure, innocent man and inject evil into him.
Pharaoh is already a brutal tyrant.
Right. During the early plagues, the text says Pharaoh hardened his own heart. Out of his own pride, he freely chose to resist God.
Okay, so he makes the initial choice.
Yes. But then a shift happens. As the plagues progress, we read that God hardened his heart. This is judicial hardening.
What does that mean?
When someone continually, violently resists God, there comes a point where God says, "Thy will be done." He withdraws his restraining grace and solidifies the person in their chosen rebellion.
So it's like Pharaoh is driving a car toward a cliff of his own free will, and God eventually reaches over and locks the steering wheel in place.
That is a brilliant analogy. God leaned into Pharaoh's pride to draw out the conflict and fully judge the pantheon of Egypt. God bent Pharaoh's evil to serve a redemptive purpose.
And woven through this conflict is this numerical symbol from the notes, the number 2.
Yes, in biblical numerology, the number 2 implies division, witness, or opposition.
And we see all 3 here.
We see the opposition, God versus Pharaoh. We see the 2 witnesses, Moses and Aaron.
And the division. Starting with the plague of flies, God draws a hard border. The swarms devastate Egypt, but stop precisely at Goshen.
God is making a physical distinction between his people and the world.
Which brings us to the climax. The 10th plague, the Passover. This introduces the most critical concept in the Bible: redemption by blood.
The events of the 14th of Nisan change history forever. The destroyer is coming, and every firstborn is under a sentence of death.
And that sentence applied to Hebrew and Egyptian alike, right?
That is the most misunderstood part. People assume Israelites were saved because they were the good guys. They weren't. Nationality or good behavior didn't exempt you.
Deliverance was based entirely on the blood of a lamb.
A male, 1-year-old, absolutely spotless lamb, killed at twilight, its blood caught in a basin.
And here's a visual detail that blew my mind. God gives them highly specific instructions on how to apply this blood.
Using hyssop, a symbol of humiliation.
Right. They dip it in the basin on the ground, strike the lintel at the top, and then strike the 2 vertical side posts.
Think about the geometry of that movement.
From the ground up to the top and then across from left to right, you are literally tracing the shape of a bloody cross over the door.
Hundreds of years before crucifixion was even invented. It is an undeniable prophetic shadow of Calvary.
The gospel hidden in plain sight.
When the Lord passes through, he explicitly says, "When I see the blood, I will pass over you." He doesn't say, "When I see your good works."
He is only looking at the door.
He is looking to see if the penalty of death has already been paid by a substitute. That's why Paul writes, "Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed."
And the details of the meal itself are loaded too. The lamb must be roasted in fire, representing judgment, and absolutely no bones can be broken.
Which is a hyper-specific prophecy fulfilled by Jesus on the cross. The Romans came to break the legs of the victims, but Jesus was already dead.
So they didn't break his legs.
And John explicitly writes that this happened to fulfill the Exodus scripture.
The precision is staggering. Now, God also commands them to eat with unleavened bread. Why no yeast?
Leaven, or yeast, is almost universally a picture of sin and corruption. It puffs up the dough, just like sin puffs up the human heart with pride.
So eating unleavened bread symbolizes a rapid separation from the sin of Egypt.
Do not bring the corruption of your old life into your new freedom.
And they have to eat it dressed for travel, sandals on, staff in hand.
Because when the midnight cry goes up, Pharaoh finally breaks. The Israelites leave as a triumphant army, plundering the wealth of the Egyptians.
But the escape isn't a straight shot. Almost immediately, God leads them to the edge of the Red Sea. They're boxed in.
An impassable sea in front, mountains on the sides, and Pharaoh's elite armored chariots charging up behind them.
The sheer visceral terror. Millions of unarmed civilians. The people absolutely panic. They start screaming at Moses.
The psychology of slavery instantly snaps back.
And Moses utters this incredible line, "Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent."
It's breathtaking leadership. God parts the waters, they walk through on dry ground.
And when the Egyptian army pursues, the waters crash back down, and the greatest military force on earth is destroyed in minutes.
The world system is buried in the water.
The Apostle Paul refers to this as a definitive type of baptism, right?
Yes, in 1 Corinthians 10, baptism is a symbol of death, burial, and resurrection. The Israelites step down into this watery grave, the old life, the slavery. It's buried.
And when they come up on the opposite shore, they are resurrected as a newborn nation.
Dead to Egypt and alive to God.
And as they march out, they are carrying something amazing with them: the bones of Joseph,
Joseph made them swear an oath hundreds of years earlier to carry his bones out.
which symbolizes a profound connection to the promise of resurrection, carrying the dead out of slavery into new life.
And they travel exactly 3 days into the wilderness, the biblical interval between death and resurrection.
But the honeymoon is over incredibly fast. They get into the wilderness, and the grumbling starts.
Salvation from Egypt was secured overnight. Getting Egypt out of their hearts, that takes 40 years.
They get thirsty, they get hungry, they start romanticizing their slavery. Oh, we remember the free fish and cucumbers.
It reveals the deep-seated nature of human unbelief.
But God responds with unmerited grace. He rains down bread from heaven, manna.
Which literally translates to, what is it? They don't even have a vocabulary for the miracle.
And Jesus connects this directly to himself in John 6. He says, "I am the true bread of life that comes down from heaven."
The manna was physical sustenance, but a shadow of Christ as spiritual sustenance.
But they still need water. And this leads to the striking of the rock at Rephidim.
God tells Moses to take the rod of judgment, stand before a massive rock at Horeb, and strike the rock.
And water pours out to sustain the nation.
Yeah.
Now, Paul decodes this for us, right?
Yes, he says that rock was Christ. Christ takes the violent strike of God's judgment on the cross, and the water of life, the Holy Spirit, is poured out.
A flawless theological model. Struck once, the water flows. But 40 years later, Moses completely breaks this model.
In the book of Numbers, the people are complaining again. God tells Moses to just speak to the rock this time.
But Moses is furious. He yells at the rebels and violently strikes the rock twice with his rod.
The water still flows because God is gracious. But God tells Moses he is banned from entering the promised land.
Which seems so harsh for just losing his temper.
But it wasn't just his temper, it was theological vandalism.
Wow.
He ruined the prophetic model. Christ is only smitten, only crucified, once. After the cross, we just speak to him in prayer.
By striking it a second time, Moses made it look like God's anger required a second beating. He misrepresented God's grace.
The way of leadership is immense.
It really is. And the struggles in the wilderness aren't just internal. They face actual military attack from Amalek.
Amalek represents the flesh, or the old, sinful human nature.
I have an analogy for this. Think about a dead body. You don't fight while you're dead. While Israel was spiritually dead in Egypt, they didn't fight battles.
They were just subjugated.
But the moment you are freed and pass through baptism, the internal war begins. Amalek attacks. And he attacks the weak stragglers from behind.
Which is exactly how the flesh operates. It attacks your vulnerabilities when you are exhausted.
So Joshua fights in the valley, but the real battle is on the hilltop.
Moses stands there with his hands raised in intercession. When his hands are up, Israel wins. When he lowers them from exhaustion, Amalek wins.
A physical demonstration of a spiritual reality.
It requires Aaron and Hur to hold his arms up until sunset. It shows that victory over the flesh requires the continuous intercession of the Spirit, supported by a community.
Amazing. So they finally arrive back at Mount Sinai, the exact location of the burning bush.
The relationship dynamics shift here from a rescue mission to a marriage covenant.
The sensory experience is terrifying. Smoke, fire, earthquakes, trumpets, and God audibly speaks the Ten Commandments.
Now, we have to clarify a major theological point. A lot of people assume the law was given so they could earn their salvation.
Be a good person, keep the rules, get into heaven. But that's completely backwards.
Entirely backwards. God had already saved them. He redeemed them with blood and brought them through the sea purely by grace.
The law was given to a people who were already redeemed. So what's the point of the rules?
It reveals God's perfect holiness, and it reveals human inability to meet it. The law is like an MRI machine.
Oh, I love that analogy.
An MRI perfectly scans your body and shows you the cancer, but it cannot cure the cancer.
It only diagnoses it.
Exactly. The law is a mirror. It shows you the dirt, but it cannot wash you. It crushes our self-righteousness, so we realize we desperately need a savior.
And nothing proves their inability to keep the law faster than the golden calf incident. Moses is on the mountain for 40 days getting the blueprints.
And at the bottom of the mountain, they completely regress.
The psychological whiplash is stunning. They just heard the voice of God say, "No carved images," and weeks later they are demanding Aaron make them gods.
Aaron caves, melts down the Egyptian gold earrings God blessed them with, and molds a calf.
The camp devolves into pagan revelry. God sees this and offers to wipe them out and start over with Moses.
But Moses steps into the breach. He refuses personal elevation and intercedes based on God's own covenant promises.
He even says, "If you won't forgive them, please blot me out of your book." He literally offers his own soul for theirs.
Serving as the ultimate shadow of Christ, offering himself as the substitute.
So Moses descends, sees the calf, and violently throws the 2 stone tablets to the ground, shattering them.
A physical, legal symbol demonstrating that the covenant was entirely broken before it was even delivered.
Judgment is executed, and Moses has to go back up for another 40 days to receive a renewed covenant.
And when he comes down the second time, his face is literally glowing with the reflected glory of God.
Emitting light. He has to wear a veil because the people are terrified.
It's an incredible picture.
So we have a dilemma. The law condemns the people. God is infinitely holy. How can God live right in the middle of their camp without incinerating them?
That dilemma forces the creation of the tabernacle, a meticulously designed blueprint for how sinful man can approach a holy God without dying.
Every peg, curtain, and piece of furniture is a shadow of Christ. Let's walk through it. From the outside, this tent is entirely unimpressive, right? Covered in badger or porpoise skins.
A direct prophetic connection to Isaiah 53. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him. To the outside world, there is nothing outwardly attractive about Christ. The glory is hidden inside.
And the structural boards are made of acacia wood overlaid with pure gold.
Wood and gold bound together, a perfect architectural representation of the hypostatic union. Fully human, fully divine.
But the foundation's what got me. These boards rest in massive sockets of solid silver. Where did they get all that silver?
Every Israelite male had to pay a half shekel of silver as a ransom for his soul.
So silver is the metal of redemption.
Yes. The very foundation of fellowship with God literally rests on blood redemption.
Let's walk inside the courtyard. The first thing blocking our path is the brazen altar.
Bronze symbolizes judgment. This is where animal sacrifices are burned. You cannot bypass the blood. The first step is always the cross.
Right past that is the bronze laver, a wash basin made from the bronze mirrors of the women.
A profound metaphor. Mirrors show your flaws. The laver represents the washing of the Word of God, revealing the dirt you pick up in your daily walk, cleansing you before you serve.
So we pull back the first curtain and step inside the holy place. Dead silent. The only light comes from the golden menorah.
Beaten out of one solid block of pure gold, representing Christ as the light of the world beaten for us, and it burns with olive oil, a symbol of the Holy Spirit.
Across from it is the table of shewbread, pierced bread baked with frankincense.
Christ as our sustenance, the bread of life.
Moving straight forward, before the final veil, is the golden altar of incense.
No animals are slaughtered here, just sweet incense burning continuously, representing the intercessory prayers of Christ and the saints ascending to God.
And then the veil itself, a massive, thick curtain woven with cherubim, the absolute barrier.
Hebrews tells us the veil represents the physical flesh of Jesus Christ,
When Christ was crucified, the veil in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom.
signifying the barrier between God and man was permanently removed.
But inside that innermost room, the Holy of Holies, sits the Ark of the Covenant, containing the broken law.
The standard that condemns every human. And covering the ark is the solid gold mercy seat with 2 cherubim.
When God looks down, he sees the law demanding death.
But on the Day of Atonement, the high priest sprinkles blood right on top of the mercy seat.
Between the gaze of God and the condemning law.
When God looks down, he sees the blood of the substitute. Justice is satisfied. Mercy covers judgment.
The entire gospel encoded into ancient furniture 1,500 years before Jesus. Breathtaking. And looking at the macro view, the notes show how this entire Exodus story maps onto the book of Revelation.
It is a rehearsal for the end of the world. The plagues of Egypt directly mirror the trumpet and bowl judgments in Revelation.
Water to blood, darkness, frogs, hailstones.
The fiery furnace of Egypt foreshadows the tribulation. Moses and Aaron foreshadow the two witnesses in Revelation 11.
It's a fractal, the historical rehearsal for the ultimate redemption of the whole earth from Satan.
Exactly.
To summarize this massive deep dive, Exodus is far more than historical politics.
Yeah.
Every detail, the bush, the blood, the sea, the tabernacle, points directly to the ultimate redemption in Jesus Christ.
And I want to leave everyone with a final thought from the Passover meal. During the Last Supper, a traditional Seder, there are 4 specific cups of wine poured.
Okay, 4 cups.
Jesus took the third cup, the cup of redemption, and said, "This is the new covenant in my blood." But then he stopped. He explicitly stated he would not drink the fruit of the vine again until the kingdom comes.
He left the meal unfinished. He didn't drink the 4th cup.
He did not drink the 4th cup, the cup of praise, of total restoration. He placed a grammatical comma in the middle of God's redemptive sentence.
Oh.
That comma has paused time for 2,000 years. The universe is just waiting for the moment.
Yeah.
He finally returns and drinks that 4th cup, restoring all things.
What a profound thought. As you go about your day, we encourage you to ponder this. What Egypt in your own life do you desperately need to leave behind? Remember, your freedom has already been purchased. You just have to step out and walk through the waters into new life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.